morning, Miss David.
If it pleases the Commissioners, I call Bishop Brian Heenan.
Bishop, just before you sit down, do you wish to take the oath or the affirmation?
The oath.
Could you repeat after me, please? I swear by Almighty God.
I swear by Almighty God.
That the evidence I shall give.
That the evidence I shall give.
In this Royal Commission.
In this Royal Commission.
Shall be the truth.
Shall be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bishop, if you just replace the Bible and take a seat, please.
Bishop Heenan, you've provided a statement to the Royal Commission dated the 13th of March 2015, and you've had an opportunity to review that statement before coming to the hearing room to give evidence. Is that correct?
Yes, I have.
And is that statement accurate to the best of your recollection?
It certainly is.
May it please the Court, I tender the statement dated the 13th of March 2015.
26.17.
And have you also provided a supplementary statement to the Royal Commission dated the 14th of April 2015?
Yes, I have.
And again, you've reviewed that before coming to the hearing room, and it's an accurate statement to the best of your recollection? I tender the supplementary statement, Your Honour.
6.18.
Bishop Heenan, you were the Catholic Bishop of the Diocese of Rockhampton from 1991 until 2013, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And you're currently the retired Bishop of the Diocese of Rockhampton.
That's correct, yes.
Can I just start by asking you a few questions about your background and training and education before you became the Bishop of Rockhampton? You were ordained in 1962, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And then you assisted other priests in parishes within the Archdiocese of Brisbane?
That's right.
Before becoming the parish priest of Zilmere and the chaplain of Nudgee College in 1977.
That's correct.
And then you were appointed the Director of Continuing Education for the Clergy of Brisbane?
Yes, that's right.
And in that role, you were a support person for other priests. So you worked closely with other priests within the diocese.
I did, yes.
And then you were ordained as the Bishop of Rockhampton in 1991.
Correct.
Prior to becoming the Bishop of Rockhampton, did you have any training in respect of allegations of sexual assault or child sexual assault in particular?
No, I didn't.
Did you have any training as to how, as a bishop, you should respond to allegations of child sexual abuse made by parishioners or other persons within your diocese?
No, not really.
So is it your evidence when you took your position or you assumed your position as Bishop of the Rockhampton, you had no training whatsoever?
No, no specific training, no.
Well, what training did you have, if any, that would impact upon how to respond to an allegation of child sexual abuse by a parishioner against a priest or another employee of the church?
I don't believe there was any specific training. There was experience, but no specific training at that stage.
Did that reflect the level of importance that the church at that time placed upon responding appropriately to allegations of child sexual abuse?
Well, I believe that the experience or the reality of sex abuse on the part of priests was just sadly rising at that time, and I don't believe that there was any preparation until the reality began to dawn.
So to the best of your recollection, prior to becoming the Bishop of Rockhampton, you had no training that would impact upon your ability to deal appropriately with allegations of child sexual abuse.
I believe that's true.
In 1993, the Church, and in particular the Diocese of Brisbane, produced a protocol on how to respond to allegations of child sexual abuse.
Yes.
And that was developed by the Queensland Catholic bishops.
Yes.
And as the Bishop of the Diocese of Rockhampton, you were involved in that?
I was.
And that protocol was prepared to provide procedures to respond to allegations of child sexual abuse or other allegations of sexual abuse. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That protocol set out the responsibilities and the requirements and the procedures for responding to such allegations.
Yes, I believe so.
And indeed it was the precursor for Queensland Diocese in respect of what later became known as the Towards Healing procedures.
Yes, that's correct.
That were not implemented until 1997. So in preparing those protocols, the 1993 protocols, you must have had some exposure to how a person or a person in your position should respond to child sexual abuse.
Yes. Yes, that's true.
And what did that involve?
Well, as I recall, sitting down with the group of Queensland bishops, we were calling on people with expertise from agencies like Centrecare and other social workers to guide us in how we should respond and how that protocol could be formed.
So what experts did you have reference to?
Well, I don't recall at this stage who they would have been, but I imagine that they were people who were experienced in the reality of sexual abuse.
So were you provided with information about how child sexual abuse or the circumstances in which children can be groomed to be sexually abused?
Yes, I believe that would have been part of it.
Were you informed that sometimes there would be no witnesses to such child sexual abuse, that sometimes it occurs due to the grooming or building of a relationship between a priest or an employee and a young child?
Yes, I believe so.
And the disproportionate power between the two? And were you advised how important it is to consider the complainant and obtaining a statement from a complainant or giving them the opportunity to speak freely about the alleged abuse?
Yes, I believe so. There was a process, 1-800 numbers, I understand, where people were invited to make known their complaints. And as far as I recall, then to approach the church authority to begin responding to that.
And was consideration also given to encouraging a child to contact the police or the relevant authorities?
I believe so, yes.
So you were aware of that kind of information and education in the lead up to the protocols of 1993 being produced by the diocese. That's correct?
Yes.
When you became the Bishop of the Diocese of Rockhampton in 1991, the orphanage at Neerkol had closed?
Correct, yes.
And it was staffed as a conference centre by the Sisters of Mercy?
Yes.
until it was sold latterly in 2000, 2001.
Yes.
But the Neerkol parish continued to exist as a church adjacent to the orphanage.
Yes, it did.
And there was still the chapel on the grounds of the orphanage.
It was.
And that was still serviced by a priest of the diocese.
It was.
And that priest continued to reside at the presbytery.
Yes.
And continued to provide ministry to Neerkol parishioners, if not the orphanage.
That's correct, yes.
And up until 1993, that parish priest was Father Durham, is that correct?
That's correct.
And he'd been there for many years, hadn't he?
I believe so.
He resigned as a priest in 1993, is that right?
Yes.
But continued as an administrator from 1994. So he continued to reside at the presbytery.
Yes.
And in his role as a parish priest, he would obviously, up to 1993, he'd obviously have contact with parishioners,
Yes.
including children.
Yes.
And as an administrator of the Neerkol parish, he would also continue to have contact with parishioners,
Yes.
including children.
Yes.
Can you assist us with who was the parish priest from 1993 onwards, after Father Durham retired?
Well, as I recall, it became part of the responsibility of the cathedral. So it would have been the administrator of the cathedral in Rockhampton. I think it might have been Father John Bailey, but I'm not sure of that.
So there was no other parish priest that resided at the presbytery?
No, definitely not.
And Father Durham continued to reside at the presbytery?
Yes.
And for all intents and purposes, he continued to play a role within the parish of Neerkol?
Yes.
And with the parishioners of Neerkol?
Yes.
So while he was no longer the designated parish priest, he still had a role to play?
Yes.
Now, Bishop Heenan, in 1993, as I understand it, you first became aware of a book written by AYC, and you've got the pseudonyms before you.
Yes. Yes.
That you became aware of that book through an article that you read in the Queensland Times, and also an article you read in the Morning Bulletin.
Yes.
So in effect there was media reports about this book. And you understood that the book written by AYC detailed allegations of physical and sexual abuse which occurred at the Neerkol Orphanage. Is that correct? And you understood that that involved physical and sexual abuse by both the nuns or Sisters of Mercy and the parish priest at Neerkol. Is that correct?
I'm not sure that I understood that it was physical or abuse by the nuns, but I am aware that there was abuse mentioned at Neerkol.
Perhaps if I'm more precise for you. You understood from reading those articles about the book that the book detailed allegations of sexual abuse which occurred at Neerkol.
Yes, yes.
And you understood that they included allegations of sexual abuse by former parish priests at Neerkol. So that formed part of your understanding.
Yes.
Did you actually read AYC's book?
I did not.
Did you make any inquiries about obtaining a copy of the book?
No, I did not.
Did you contact AYC in respect of the book?
No, I did not.
Was there any particular reason why you didn't do, first of all, why you didn't read the book? Or at least look at it?
No, I can't think of a particular reason.
Was there any particular reason why you didn't contact AYC about the book?
No, I don't think there was a particular reason. I suppose I thought there might have been contact with others. I'm sure there were, because they made me aware of the book. But no, there wasn't any special reason that I can recall.
Were you interested in reading the allegations?
Well, I was disturbed by the allegations, but I regret now that I didn't read the book, but I didn't read the book, no.
Did you believe the allegations as they were recounted in the media?
Well, I suppose I was in that stage of trying to come to terms with the reality, trying to come to terms with belief, and to be true to say that I was still in that process of wondering whether this was all true.
Did you think that it might assist you in determining whether or not you needed to respond to those allegations by finding out with any specificity what they involved?
Well, in retrospect, I can say I should have read the book and I should have made that contact, and I'm sure it would have helped me, but I didn't.
And do you think that part of the reason why you didn't make those inquiries is because you were primarily concerned with protecting the church's reputation at that stage? You didn't want these matters to come to light?
I think that would be true.
And at that stage in 1993, when you saw the media reports about this book, how would you describe your understanding of child sexual abuse and the appropriate or the most effective way to respond to allegations of child sexual abuse?
Could you repeat that question for me, please?
Do you think you had a good grasp on what was an effective and appropriate way to respond to allegations of child sexual abuse?
Well, I had the guidance, I guess, of the protocol that had been set up by the Queensland bishops. Well, having had no experience of dealing with perpetrators, I don't think I had an adequate formed opinion or process that I would work through as to deal with such people.
In 1993, when you read these allegations, as the book was described in the media, did it concern you that perhaps some of those perpetrators might still be within the church, administering within the ministry?
I did not advert to that, I must admit.
In retrospect, do you think that's something that you should have done?
Yes, I do.
After the allegations or the book was publicised, the book written by AYC, which contained allegations about sexual abuse at Neerkol, you received some correspondence from AYB?
Yes.
So on the 1st of June 1993, you received a letter from AYB?
Yes.
And just to refresh your memory, if we could bring up the document behind tab 25. This is a letter directed to you, or addressed to you on the 1st of June, dated the 1st of June 1993. And you've been shown this letter before giving evidence.
I have.
And you recognise it as a letter that you received?
Yes, I do.
And in effect, the author tells you in that letter that as a child, she suffered a rather traumatic time and was sexually abused for a number of years by one of the priests.
Yes.
And in the penultimate paragraph, she says that she will be in Rockhampton, and she gives some dates, and she would really appreciate spending an hour with you. Do you have any recollection of having received that letter?
Yes, I do. Yes.
And did you respond to that letter?
I didn't. Not.
Didn't you respond to that letter?
Well, I don't really know. I may have been occupied with other ministries, but I don't recall why I didn't respond.
You received this letter not long after you first saw the publicity about AYC's book. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did the combination of the two cause you any concern? That there might still be members of priests in your ministry or within the church who were having contact with persons who were alleged to have sexually abused children?
No, I did not make that contact.
On the 17th of July 1993, you received a further letter from AYB.
Yes, I did.
And if we can very briefly bring up that letter under tab 28. AYB says at this stage she's had no response to her letter of 6 weeks earlier. She also says that her 4 phone calls fell on deaf ears. Firstly, do you recall receiving this letter?
I do.
Do you recall being notified of 4 phone calls from AYB?
Don't recall that. It could well have happened, but I don't recall it.
In this letter, AYB makes it clear that in her mind, priests and bishops must be made to look at the effects that sexual abuse has on innocent people, and you can't go on pretending that it does not happen. She also says in the last paragraph that when I'm at home, I have to listen to my parents sing the praises of the priest involved. He is still a very important part of our family and is held in such high esteem. Do you see that?
No, I'm still looking for the part about his being held in high esteem.
That's on page 2. If perhaps we go to the handwritten.
Oh,
No, on the document. We're on tab 28. Go to if we scroll up, it should be page 2. Can you see that?
It's the paragraph that commences some 25 years later.
So the last sentence.
Yes, well, that's coming up now, yes. Yes, I can see it now.
And you recall receiving this letter?
Yes, I do.
And reading it?
Yes, I do.
And you would agree that that paragraph suggests that the person is still alive?
Yes.
And still part and parcel of AYB's family? Did that cause you any concern that this person was still practising as a priest, or at least involved with families, parishioners?
Well, all I can say is it didn't concern me sufficiently to make me do something about his ministry. I regret that.
As a result of the second letter you write to AYB, and you write to AYB on the 5th of August 1993, and you say that you would like to meet with her.
Yes.
And yet you don't meet with her until February 1994, do you?
And that's correct.
Was there any particular reason for that, for the delay?
Well, I'm wondering whether it had something to do with AYB's coming to Rockhampton, because she did not live in Rockhampton. But I have two regrets: that I didn't respond to the first letter, and that this meeting didn't take place sooner.
You didn't organise to go to Brisbane, did you, to see her?
I did not.
And that was something that you could quite easily have done, given the 2 letters that you had received and the 4 phone calls.
Yes.
Was there any reason why you didn't do that?
I think I had the understanding that AYB would be coming to Rockhampton, and that would be the opportunity to discuss it with her.
In February 1994, you do meet with AYB, and that occurs in Brisbane or in Rockhampton?
Rockhampton, I believe.
And at that time, or shortly afterwards, she tells you that the person, the parish priest who sexually abused her, is Father Durham.
Yes.
So you know that fact from early 1994. Whether it's at the first meeting or a subsequent meeting, it's in February 1994 that AYB tells you it's Father Durham who sexually abused her.
Yes, yes.
And she tells you this wasn't a brief incident, doesn't she?
Yes.
You understood as of February 1994 that it was an ongoing sexual relationship. Is that right?
Yes, yes.
And when I use the term relationship, I mean it occurred more than once. And that it occurred when she was a very young girl. So you agree that as of February 1994, you were aware of the seriousness of AYB's allegations?
Yes.
And at that time, as you've agreed, you were also aware of the book by AYC and that alleged sexual allegations as well. As of early 1994, you also understood that Father Durham was the administrator of the Neerkol parish.
That's correct, yes.
And continued to reside in the presbytery and continued to be employed by the Catholic Church. You were also aware, weren't you, in February 1994, at about this time, that there were other complaints of child sexual abuse by Catholic clergy in Queensland, about Catholic clergy in Queensland.
Yes.
Broken Rights, the organisation, had written to you and advised you of that, hadn't they?
Not sure whether they had written to me or I had seen that recorded somewhere. I'm not sure about that.
But you agree that as of February 1994, you were also aware that there had been complaints by other persons, 3 people in particular, of sexual abuse by members of the clergy. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
And if we can bring up tab 31. This is a young picture of you, and this is an article concerning comments that you made.
Yes.
And can I just draw your attention to some of those comments in this article, and it's dated the 11th of February 1994. So just to put it in its context, this is shortly after you've met with AYB.
Yes.
And at paragraph 3 of this article, it says that the Bishop responded yesterday to allegations by the Broken Rights organisation that at least 3 central Queensland men were victims of sexual abuse by Catholic clergy during their teens in the early 1970s. Do you see that?
Yes, I see that.
So you were aware of allegations of child sexual abuse in the 1970s. You say that the prime concern was for the victims of such abuse and the Church was seeking ways to support those who had suffered.
Yes.
And then you go on to say that you were also seeking to help the perpetrators. You then go on to say that, or you're reported to have said, it's your deep sadness that the reputation of all priests and religious were tarnished with such allegations. It's all too easy to make allegations, but they are often taken to be proven even before an investigation has begun. Do you see that?
I do see that.
Do you agree that you said that?
Yes, I do.
And was that your view then, that it was easy to make the allegations?
Well, it wasn't well said because I was, I suppose, reacting to my shock and disappointment that this was being reported, this was being alleged. So I was certainly wanting to be defensive of all the good priests and religious that I knew, and perhaps made not enough, gave not enough stress to the reality that this was being alleged.
Bishop, my question is, did you believe in 1994, when you made that comment, that it was in fact easy to make allegations, but they are often taken to be proven even before an investigation has begun? Did you believe the first part of that statement, that it was easy to make allegations?
Yes, I did.
Did you think that it was easy for a person to come forward and recount an allegation of child sexual abuse, particularly 3 men?
When you put it that way, I agree it would not have been easy for them.
You know that now?
Yes, I do, yes.
But in 1994, did you understand that?
Yes, I did. Well, if it was 1994, then it was an inappropriate statement on my part. I accept that.
But I guess I'm asking about your state of understanding back then. Did you believe that in 1994?
Yes, I think I did believe that in 1994.
And you agree now that shows a complete lack of understanding of
Yes.
child sexual abuse?
Well, of the reality of it, the extent of it, yes.
And it shows a complete lack of understanding of how difficult it is for victims of child sexual abuse to report allegations.
Oh, yes, I do. I understand.
You also say in this article that you were looking or seeking ways to support those who had suffered. I'll just direct your attention to it. It's in the 3rd paragraph, the last sentence of that paragraph. You see that?
Yes, I do.
Yep,
I
you
do.
picked
Yes,
that up?
yes, I do.
Can you tell us what you were doing to assist or support those who had suffered?
Well, maybe that was a statement I was making as a promise, a hope for the future. I can't detail anything that we were doing at that stage.
You hadn't contacted AYC, had you? The author of the book?
No.
You'd had a meeting with AYB, that's correct. Did you ever get in contact with the 3 men who were reported to have made those allegations?
No, I don't believe so.
So can you tell us anything that you were doing in February 1994 to support those who had suffered?
I cannot.
In 1994, after you had met with AYB, at some stage, Mr. Noel Hines was appointed by the Diocese of Brisbane to deal with allegations or respond to allegations of child sexual abuse. Is that right?
Well, it was Father Noel Hines.
Sorry, Father Noel Hines.
Right, good.
That's correct, isn't it?
Yes, it is correct.
And after you were aware of the allegations of AYB, you met with Father Durham and Father Hines at the Neerkol Presbytery?
No, at my own home.
At your home. And that was in direct response to the allegations made by AYB?
Yes.
But Father Durham was still residing at the presbytery?
Yes.
What was the purpose of that meeting in 1994?
Well, as I recall, it was to inform Father Durham that these serious allegations had been made known to me and that he needed to be aware that action possibly would follow, that he was in a very difficult situation, and I needed to be sure that he understood what was being said.
Subsequent to that, there was a meeting in Brisbane between AYB and Father Durham.
Yes.
And Father Hines.
Yes.
But you weren't involved in that meeting.
No.
And what was the purpose of the second meeting that involved AYB?
The second meeting?
So the meeting between Father Durham and AYB and Father Hines that you weren't involved in?
Well, as I recall, AYB had requested that I arrange a meeting with Father Durham and herself.
And why weren't you there?
Well, as I said somewhere, I think in my statement, that I had appointed Father Hines as the person who was the liaison person, and I chose to leave him to be that relational person.
And what did you understand the outcome of that meeting to be?
Well, as I understood from what I received from AYB, that there had been a meeting between themselves, the two of them, and that I understood that there was some acceptance or some acceptance of responsibility on the part of Father Durham for the situation, but that there was to be no further outcome or no further action.
No further action by whom?
By myself, or nothing being asked for at that stage by AYB.
So this meeting occurs in 1994, and at this time, Father Durham continues to live at the presbytery,
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
He continues to work within the church as an administrator?
Yes.
And he continues to draw an income from the church?
Yes.
And he continues to have contact in that role with the parishioners?
Yes.
And with children?
Yes.
Did you consider that appropriate at the time?
Well, I didn't see the inappropriateness of it. I do so now. I believe that because AYB was not sort of pressing for action, that lulled me or yes, put me into a situation of saying let it continue. But again, all I can say is, in retrospect, I believe it was the wrong thing for me not to remove him.
And why was it the wrong thing?
Well, because I had an understanding of his ministry and of what had happened, and there was contact with parishioners and with children.
Because as of 1994, you knew, didn't you, that Father Durham, the allegation was that Father Durham had been in a long-standing, or had on numerous occasions, had sexual intercourse with a child.
Yes, yes.
And you had received those letters from AYB which set out, I suggest, the impact that had had on her,
yes,
correct?
Yes.
And she asked to confront Father Durham, didn't she? And in your mind that must have, I suggest, reinforced the veracity of her claims.
Yes.
So as of that time, your evidence is, I assume, that you accepted her allegations.
I did.
And yet you allowed Father Durham to remain at a presbytery, at a parish, where he would inevitably have contact with children. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Do you accept that that placed other children at a risk of further sexual abuse?
I do.
And that decision showed a complete lack of understanding of the significance of the impact of child sexual abuse on those victims?
Yes, I do accept that.
And do you accept that it was a wholly inadequate decision by you in terms of protecting other children within the parish of Neerkol?
Yes.
At any stage, was there any discussion with AYB about reporting the allegations made against Father Durham to the police?
My understanding was that AYB did not want action to be taken because she retained, in my understanding, great respect or great affection for Father Durham. There's a relationship with her parents and family, and she said in one letter, I don't want any harm to come to him. So again, that was one of the reasons I was prepared to let the situation continue without taking action.
Was another reason that you were concerned about the reputation of the Catholic Church and you didn't want the matter to have public exposure?
Well, I'm sure that was there somewhere, but it wouldn't have been a primary reason.
Now, today, if allegations such as these are raised, there is a policy for the church and the person to whom the allegation is reported to refer the matter to the police, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
And what do you understand to be the reason for that policy?
Well, I think it's to ensure that there is not a cover-up of allegations, there's not a continuing danger to children.
And do you accept that that would have been the appropriate thing to do in 1994 when you became aware of the identity of Father Durham as the person that AYB was talking about?
Yes, I do accept.
Because it was a matter for her, wasn't it, whether she ultimately proceeded with any charges against Father Durham?
Yes, yes.
And that was quite distinct from you. From the church and yourself.
Yes.
In 1993 and 1994, you also became aware of allegations made by David Owen against another parish priest.
Yes.
And you became aware of that through correspondence you received from Father Punzel, I think you pronounce it.
Yes, that's correct.
and he had received correspondence from the police, from the CID. And that correspondence involved the police wanting information about a Father Anderson.
Yes.
In 1994, did you know who Father Anderson was?
I knew he was a priest who had been at Neerkol. Yes, I did, yes.
So you knew that he was the second priest that you had now received allegations about having committed sexual abuse at Neerkol. And as of April 1994, you were aware of the allegations made by David Owen against Father Anderson.
Yes.
And you were aware of that in the same time period that you were aware of AYB, the allegations made by AYB, the three clergy, the three men in central Queensland that we've seen referred to in the article, correct? And also the book by AYC. So by April 1994, you've now been made aware of a considerable number of allegations of sexual abuse against members of your clergy, yes? Mr. Owen instituted civil proceedings against the diocese. By the time Mr. Owen came forward with his allegations, Father Anderson had died, hadn't he?
Yes.
So there were no associated criminal proceedings.
No.
And you instructed your solicitors to defend his civil claim.
Yes.
On the basis that the time limitations had passed. Is that correct? In 1993, 1994, you also became aware of allegations made by AYQ.
Yes.
And Father Punzel also notified you of those allegations.
He did.
And they too were allegations against Father Anderson, who you understood had been a parish priest at Neerkol.
Yes.
And as a result of that, AYQ also instituted civil proceedings. And again, you instructed your solicitors to defend those civil proceedings.
Yes.
And the church or the diocese was successful in defending both those civil claims on the basis that the time limitations had passed. So just to summarise, just so we understand your state of understanding as of 1996, you were aware of the allegations contained in the book by AYC. You were aware of the allegations of serious sexual abuse made by AYB against Father Durham. You were aware of sexual allegations made by David Owen and AYQ against Father Anderson. And you were also aware that David Owen had in fact gone to the police in respect of those matters. And you'd also been made aware of three young men, or older now, but three men who in their teens had been sexually abused by clergy.
Yes.
And the allegations by AYC, AYB, David Owen and AYQ all related to parish priests who had worked at Neerkol.
Correct.
And that was your state of understanding in 1996.
Yes.
And then later in 1996, you're informed of another allegation of sexual abuse by Father Durham, that allegation being made by AYP, correct?
Yes. Yes.
And that came about because AYB had contacted a Father Black in Perth, and Father Black had contacted Father Grace, and Father Grace had taken over from Father Hines in the Brisbane Diocese.
Rockhampton Diocese.
Rockhampton Diocese. And he was the person responding to allegations of child sexual abuse. And he, in turn, made you aware, as the bishop,
Yes.
of the allegation of sexual abuse. And AYP's husband directly contacted your office, didn't
Yes,
he?
he did.
Just to make sure that you were aware of the allegation. So this was the second allegation against Father Durham,
Yes.
and the fourth person making allegations against Father Anderson or Father Durham. And we add to that the book by AYC. In response to AYP's allegation, you meet with Father Durham, don't you?
Yes, I do. Yes.
And at this stage, you decide that you're going to tell him or restrict his contact with children.
Yes.
So at that stage, you agree, it's within your contemplation, that he's having contact with children.
Yes.
That's the purpose of putting the restriction on him. And this restriction you're not imposing until 3 years after you first are advised of the allegations by AYB. So it takes you 3 years to restrict his contact with children. Is that correct? And I think you acknowledge that is a wholly inadequate response.
Yes, I do.
How are you going to monitor that contact or that restriction on his contact with children? How are you going to supervise that?
Well, I guess I was relying on his obedience to my direction, but that wouldn't be monitoring. But I assumed that he would, and I believe he did accept what I said, but monitoring, I'm not sure.
Well, how would you know if he didn't?
Well, I suppose I wouldn't accept. No, I wouldn't know unless someone told me, but I believe he didn't continue any further contact with schools or with children, but that's all I can...
Was he having contact with schools before that restriction?
Well, he was going to a little state school, I understand, to do religious education as going in on a once-a-week basis.
That's a primary school?
A primary state school, yes, yes.
Did that cause you any concern?
Well, it began to cause me concern. Yes, it did. I probably made the very wrong assumption that because of his age and because of this wouldn't be happening again, but that wasn't appropriate.
Did you meet with AYP during this time?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't.
Why was that? And what was the purpose of that visit?
Well, he rang me and he was obviously disturbed. So I simply drove out there to talk to him face to face.
And what was your response to him about the charges? Well, not the charges, about being interviewed by police.
Well, as I understood, I would have said to him that these charges are very serious, and I said to him, you need to get legal advice on your position.
Did you place any further restrictions on him in terms of his role as an administrator?
No, I don't believe I did at that stage.
Did he maintain his employment as an administrator?
He did.
And did he remain a priest within your diocese?
He did.
You didn't take any steps to defrock him or anything like that?
No, I did not.
You didn't take any steps to suspend his employment?
No, I did not.
And at that time, did you take any steps to ask him to leave the presbytery where he was living?
No, I did not.
And why was that?
Well, it's all part of what I said before, a very inadequate response to the whole situation that around Father Durham, around the dangers that I guess remained there in his ministry, and just a very inadequate response on my part to the situation, which I regret.
Can I ask you this, Bishop? Obviously, you can't have a final view on the truth or otherwise of the allegations, but in 1996, did you accept, generally speaking, the veracity of the allegations made by AYP? Did you accept that she was, generally speaking, a truthful person who was telling the truth?
I did accept that.
And similarly, did you accept that AYB had been a truthful person?
Certainly did.
And did you accept that David Owen and David Owen first had been telling the truth about Father Anderson?
Yes, I did.
And similarly, AYQ about Father Anderson?
I believe so.
So by 1996, you accepted the general veracity or truthfulness of those witnesses?
Yes.
Of those people?
Yes, yes.
And given that between 1993 and 1996, you had two complainants in respect of each priest, did that fortify your view in that respect? It made it more likely, didn't it?
It did. Didn't fortify my view sufficiently, obviously.
So by that stage, in respect of Father Durham, you have allowed a man to continue to reside at the presbytery in a parish within your diocese, correct? And while you've placed this restriction on him, he's not to have contact with children, you've done nothing to supervise or monitor that, have you?
Right.
And do you accept that in responding in such a fashion, you've increased the risk of Father Durham offending against other children?
Certainly provided the opportunity for offending. I'm not sure increasing, but I certainly do.
Well, you've done nothing of in any meaningful way to stop that, have you?
No.
Notwithstanding that you accept the veracity of what these people are telling you. Now that brings us to September 1996. And on the 13th of September 1996, the Honourable Kevin Lingard released a ministerial statement in respect of Neerkol. If we can turn to tender bundle number 69. We've heard a lot during the course of the evidence about this statement,
yes,
but it might be worth just looking at precisely what was said by Mr. Lingard. We scroll down. Talks about Neerkol, that it's currently being used for conference and accommodation facilities, that children lived at Neerkol. And then at the top of page 2, Mr. Lingard says that to date 6 calls have been received from former residents on the child sexual abuse hotline. Allegations continue to be received about abuse to both male and female children. Then callers to the hotline allege a pattern of incidents of physical and in some cases sexual abuse by the priests and nuns at the orphanage. In all but one case, the alleged perpetrators are dead or deceased, and that the Queensland Police Service is investigating the allegations, and that the callers have asked for an inquiry, and that Mr. Lingard will refer the matter to the Children's Commissioner. Now, in that ministerial statement, would you agree that's a fairly sanitised or plain ministerial statement, isn't it? There are no lurid allegations contained in there, are there?
That's correct, yes.
At its highest, it says there are some allegations of child sexual abuse. Correct? Yep. Okay. And, of course, by the 13th of September 1996, you knew that to be true, didn't you?
Yes.
Because at the very least, you knew of AYC's book, you knew of David Owen's allegations, you knew of not AYB, she's a bit separate, but you knew of AYP's allegations, and you knew of AYQ's allegations. And they all related to former residents of the orphanage, and they all related, at least in part, to conduct by priests. So there should have been nothing particularly surprising about that ministerial statement. Do you agree with that? And in response, on the 24th of September 1996, you write a pastoral letter, don't you? And if we pull that up, it's under tab 74. We just go to the end, the second page. Sorry, second paragraph. We just go up a bit. Sorry. Okay. You recognise this as the letter that you wrote?
I do.
And in paragraph 2, you say, over recent weeks, scurrilous allegations have been made against the sisters and the priests in the form of claims of physical and sexual abuse. Slanderous statements have been made about the conduct of the orphanage, the conditions that prevailed there, and in general about the care that was given to the children. As I understand your statement, you are saying that in response not only to the ministerial statement but also to media reports. Is that correct? In paragraph 2, though, you refer to forms of claims of physical and sexual abuse as scurrilous allegations, don't you? And why do you say that? What is scurrilous about claims of sexual allegations in particular?
Well, can I just say I will regret having written this letter for the rest of my days, but...
I'm sure you do. I'm just asking
yes,
why you wrote it.
Yes, I know. What I wanted to say is that I think I said in my statement that I was reacting wrongly and sort of in an appropriate way to a lot of very bad publicity about the orphanage, which I didn't believe was all true. So that I made this sudden and almost knee-jerk statement, which I see now, I saw very quickly was very wrong, especially as it offended so badly those who had been abused. But if you ask me the question again, I just saw the publicity was almost over the top and taking away any goodness for the orphanage over 100 years. And I realise now it was a very bad and wrong statement to make.
In your statement, Bishop Heenan, at paragraph 52, you refer to the numerous articles that were published about Neerkol, including stories of abuse, along with stories about children being murdered, infants being buried in lime pits, hidden graves, female residents forced to fight on Saturdays, and children being locked in dungeons. Do you recall writing that?
I do.
None of those matters have a sexual component to them, do they? They're not allegations of sexual abuse. Right? You agree with that?
I do.
So why is it that you refer in your pastoral letter to the allegations of sexual abuse as scurrilous?
No good reason.
Because by 1996, on your evidence, you accepted the veracity of what AYB, AYQ, David Owen and AYB had said about the sexual abuse they had suffered at the hands of former parish priests. Correct?
Yes.
Yep. Did you write this because you were more concerned about protecting the reputation of the Catholic Church rather than a consideration of the impact of that statement on the former residents who'd suffered at the hands of former parish priests?
Yes,
And you've heard the evidence that's been given in the hearing room about the
yes.
impact of that statement
Yeah.
on former victims,
Yes.
on victims of former victims of sexual abuse at the orphanage. You've heard the impact of that statement
Yes, I
on
have.
them.
Yeah, I have.
And do you accept that making a statement such as that exacerbated and worsened the impact of the sexual abuse upon them?
Yes, I do accept that.
You asked for that letter to be read at Mass throughout the diocese?
That's correct, yes.
To be printed in the newsletter?
Well, to be read or printed in the newsletter of each parish.
To be published in the Catholic Leader
Yes.
paper?
Yes.
To be widely distributed?
Well, that was as far as I directed.
And in doing so, it was going to come to the attention of numerous former residents of the Neerkol Orphanage.
Yes.
Do you think a letter such as that was consistent with the 1993 protocols developed by yourself in conjunction with other priests or bishops on how to respond appropriately to allegations of child sexual abuse?
No, I do not consider it.
It runs directly across that, doesn't it? Cuts directly across that.
Yes.
And do you also agree that it hardly encourages people who have suffered abuse at the hands of priests, at Neerkol or otherwise, to come forward with their allegations?
I agree that that does not help.
Indeed, would you agree that it would actually prevent someone or inhibit someone from coming forward with those allegations, reading a statement like that?
It could do.
Because implicit in that is that you will not have the support of the church. Agree with that? You will not be believed. Agree with that?
No, I don't believe it was that far extended. I know it's not, on the evidence, it's not looking as though people would be believed, but I didn't intend that to be the situation.
It wasn't the case that as part of protecting the reputation of the church, you were trying to prevent or disincline people from coming forward with these allegations?
Well, it certainly could be true.
So by September 1996, you released this pastoral letter.
Yes.
And by this stage, have you had discussions with other bishops within Queensland about the impact on the Catholic Church generally of allegations of sexual abuse against parish priests?
I don't recall having that discussion, but I'm not sure. I certainly wouldn't exclude them because we met together as bishops regularly.
Did you have contact in 1996 with Bishop Malone of the Maitland-Newcastle region?
I did.
In what capacity would you have contact with him? How often would you speak with him, or what was your relationship like with him?
Well, all the Australian bishops meet together regularly and we form committees. And I was on a committee with Bishop Malone for quite some years. And so we would have been meeting in a general conference. We would have been meeting at a committee level fairly regularly. The committee was one of the several committees that we were on.
And what did that committee involve?
The main committee was on looking after clergy and religious. That was the title of it at that time.
And how long were you on a committee with Bishop Malone for?
Probably 6 years.
So 6 years before 1996, or?
Around that time.
So you became a bishop in you became a bishop
so
of
it wouldn't
Rockhampton.
be the 6 years, no.
So from 1991, when you became the Bishop of Rockhampton,
yes.
you would have contact with Bishop Malone from that time?
Well, he came a little bit after me. Maybe he came in 62 or 3, but fairly close. But then we became bishops together and worked on this committee together.
And where would you meet? Would that be in Queensland?
Meet in Sydney normally.
And how often would you meet?
Well, we met at least twice a year, and then if we had a special need for that committee to come together for other reasons, we might meet 2 more times, but always, usually anyway, in Sydney.
And would you discuss with Bishop Malone matters particular to your diocese, to your ministry, or would it just be about was he someone who you had a level of confidence with, or was it a more personal relationship, or was it more a relationship that was dictated by your roles?
Well, it was a bit of both, I think, because we were friends, but we also worked together on official areas.
Can I just ask you to look at a letter under tab 65? This is a letter dated the 14th of May 1996.
Yes.
And it's a letter to Mr. Owen, David Owen, from Bishop Malone.
Yes.
And it relates to his allegations of sexual abuse by Father Anderson. Have you seen this letter before today? And do you recognise this letter?
Yes, I do.
Had you seen this in 1996?
I don't believe so. No, I don't think so.
Where do you recognise this letter from?
Well, it certainly came in the documents that helped me prepare for today.
So prior to preparing your statement for the Royal Commission, do you recall having seen this letter?
I can't be sure of that.
In this letter, Bishop Malone refers to a meeting that he's had with Mr. Owen.
Yes.
And he expresses his distress that Mr. Owen has suffered so much at the hands of the church.
Yes.
He says that the behaviour of Father Anderson and the sisters is contrary to everything the church stands for. He says that I know an apology will not change the past, but I'm absolutely ashamed that such behaviour was perpetrated against yourself and others. And he declares as a bishop of the church that there was no excuse and that he's deeply sorry.
Yes.
And then he talks about what a privilege it was to meet Mr. Owen. As of May 1996, had you met with Mr. Owen?
No, I don't believe so.
Had you written any letters to him offering an apology?
I don't believe so.
Had you done anything to facilitate any pastoral care or any sort of approach to Mr. Owen?
I don't recall whether I did.
The fact that there were civil proceedings in 1994, 1995, that wouldn't have precluded you from offering some pastoral care to Mr. Owens, would it?
Well, it shouldn't have, but I don't know whether it did.
Can I now ask you to look at a letter under tab 75? We can see this letter is received on the 30th of September 1996 and it's dated the 24th of September, so we can assume that's 1996.
Yes.
So some months after the letter from Bishop Malone to Mr. Owen. And it's a letter from Michael, and that's Bishop Malone's first name.
Yes.
Do you recognise that as his handwriting?
Yes.
And indeed, it's from the Diocese of Maitland, Newcastle. And in it he says, I'm sorry that you have been troubled by past incidents at an orphanage in your diocese, and even sorrier that my letter to Dave has added to your woes. Even when I wrote that letter back in May, I felt a little uneasy about sending it. However, Dave was a real mess, and I knew an apology to him was an appropriate course of action, so I sent it. In retrospect, I know I did the right thing. The lawyers may not like it, but it needed to be done for his sake. If we are serious about helping the victims of sexual abuse, then we must follow through on our intent, even if it damages our own image in the process. Hope you can work through the issue with your usual calm wisdom. My thoughts and prayers are with you. Did you have any conversations or correspondence with Bishop Malone between May 1996 and September 1996?
I don't remember doing that. I may have.
Can you provide any explanation why Bishop Malone thought that his apology might add to your woes?
Well, I wrote him a letter. Was that after this? I'm not sure. I wrote a little note to him.
To whom?
To Bishop Michael. I'm not sure whether my knowledge of Mr. Owen's contact with Bishop Michael Malone came through a letter or through a program, or TV program, or some other contact. But I know that I became aware that Bishop Michael had met up with Mr. Owen, and somehow I became aware of that. I'm not sure.
Did you express some displeasure to Bishop Malone about him apologising to Mr. Owen on behalf of the church?
No, I believe my displeasure was because he had gone ahead without contacting myself or the Diocese of Rockhampton. As I said before, we were friends, and I just was wanting to say to him that I think it would have been more appropriate for him to work with us before making a statement. So that's...
Well, after you would agree that this shows you've become aware of the apology.
Yes.
And after you became aware of that, and you've written this letter in September, or you've received this letter in September 1996, did you then offer an apology to Mr. Owen on behalf of the church?
I don't believe I did.
And why was that?
I don't know why I didn't do that, but to say, in retrospect, things would have been different, but I haven't. I don't know.
Do you accept because as of the end of 1996, you still didn't fully understand or appreciate the significance and the impact this sexual abuse had had on people such as David Owen?
Yes, I would accept that.
Your Honour, is that a convenient time?
Yes, we'll take the mid-morning break
Thank
now.
you.